And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering Indiana women's basketball. This is our 122nd episode, recorded on Wednesday, July 31st, 2024. I'm your host, Jeff Marlow, joined tonight by my co-host, Kathy Amos. And tonight we'll be previewing another of IU's new Big Ten opponents, the Oregon Ducks. But as usual, we'll start this show with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And Kathy, I'm going to go to this. Today, Hoosier Ticket Project has had their giving blitz. They're trying to raise $15,000 today, 24-hour period for that. So if you're watching us live on YouTube and haven't had a chance to go to HoosierTicketProject.org and make a donation, by all means, we really encourage you to do that. Last I saw, they were at a little over $9,000. So they were about 60% of the way to the goal. The last time I saw it updated. So our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, which includes the Assembly Call, Crimson Cast, and now the Dribble Drive podcast hosted by our friend of the show, Austin Render. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for schools in their existing line. You are bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. Not only do you get quality apparel, but you are supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelly School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23, HOM23, to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. And in some news around the Indiana program, some from alumni news. First of all, Alexa Golbe has signed with DVTK Miskolc. It's Hungary's top team for the upcoming season. They were the regular season and the playoff champion in Hungary last year. Jory Davis has signed with Baxi Farrell in the Spanish League. And Amanda Cahill has been spending this summer playing in the Australian League with Ipswich down under. So some of our former alumni playing or upcoming seasons. And we'd mentioned in the last episode, Grace Berger is signed with a team in Turkey for the upcoming season. The program announced that they had a team GPA of 3.428 and were recognized by the Women's Basketball Coaches Association top 25 special mentions. So congrats to the players on the team for that honor. The program has named Isaiah Specs as the new director of player development and scouting after being a graduate manor this past season. Hoosier Ticket Project Blitz is giving blitzes today. And then the big news today, the Big Ten announced for the next 4 years where they're going to be hosting Big Ten tournaments in basketball. On the women's side, the next 2 years will be in Indianapolis at Gainsbridge Fieldhouse. Then in 2027, they're going to Las Vegas. And in 2028, it'll come back to the Midwest. They'll be in Detroit. So Kathy, we'll kind of turn it over to you for your Amos angle and get your thoughts, but also maybe what you thought about some of those news items.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Jeff, happy Wednesday to you and everyone out there. Hopefully you're all staying cool or whatever storms might be coming through. Check local listings, I guess, staying safe and with yourself and your property and all your loved ones. So happy summer, almost over. Jeff and I were talking before we went on air how it's quickly wrapping up here. Tomorrow being August already. It seems like it's just flying by. We got college football and NFL right around the corner. So I expect news to start picking up, but we already got some great headlines here today. The one for me, I think, like you mentioned, is the Big Ten announcing the new tournament sites. And you can definitely tell with the expansion of the league, they are also expanding, I guess, their horizon with the locations. So 2 in Indianapolis, 1 in Vegas, and 1 in Detroit. They're kind of bouncing around the country and kind of spreading it out over different areas. So also appreciate the banner moment in particular here today with the Hoosier Ticket Project. I've been very happy to personally being associated with them here the last couple of years and trying to help promote their cause. With a little video that I recorded in addition with Galen Clavio from Crimson Cast and with Anthony Leal as well. So not that we all were in the same room recording that, obviously, but they put us together. So I was happy to have that kind of company. When they had asked me to do that, I felt pretty honored. So if you haven't given to them, they've really made a lot of families happy with the different sporting events they've been able to help provide their tickets to, whether it's football or men or women's basketball in particular. So just really happy to be associated with that group in particular. So overall, those are some of my kind of thoughts. Our alumni as well, just making great waves. It'll be interesting to see how Alexa does in Hungary there. And Amanda Cahill going down Australia was an interesting one. And, she's picking up where she left off with averaging around 17 points and 10 rebounds. So it looks like she's having a nice season there as well. So for me, those are some of kind of my thoughts. And I think, Jeff, we were thinking about maybe highlighting a little bit again of the song that Jared put together using his AI using Mackenzie Holmes quotes. So it is a long song, but we will sample a little bit here now. Maybe
real quick. Real quick before you do. I was gonna say real quick before you play the music. What do you think? I thought I did find it a little odd, and I don't know exactly when they released it, but the men have already released their non-conference schedule, and yet the women haven't. Are you a little surprised by that?
Yeah, we're sitting here, like I mentioned, almost into August, and we don't have a whole lot. Like, we know we got Butler, we know we have Stanford coming in, but I don't know that we know any of the other non-conference teams and that will be playing yet. So I would have thought at least like the Butler news, I think that was not ever actually officially published by the Indiana women's basketball program, but it definitely was by Butler, right?
I agree.
So I'm a little surprised. A little surprised we haven't officially come out and had any other, even if it's not officially by the women's basketball program. Like, you would have thought some other team like Butler did would announce that they were coming into Assembly Hall to be, playing the Hoosiers. So it's been pretty quiet. And that will make it an interesting way to be able to do analysis once we finally get on the schedule. But come August, you would have thought some of that non-conference would have kind of squeaked out there for us. So yeah, I am a little bit surprised, Jeff. Are you as well?
Yeah, I am. And I mean, I don't necessarily need to know times or anything like that, but I would just thought by now you would have known dates and who they were playing. So maybe we'll get that in the next couple of weeks. But I just thought it was the men having theirs out already. I just kind of thought it was, not strange, but just, just kind of interesting that it's not out yet.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Shall we hit some of that music? All right. Really wanted to take it all in. I just want them to know how much I love them. They're the best fans in the country. And I've been so blessed every second I've gotten to play in the hall. And I'll never take those moments for granted. It's the greatest blessing in my life. I'm forever grateful to be a Hoosier. They're the best fans in the country, and I love every second we did the work. We did the work. All right, and there you have it. And there we have some of the, again, sample. That's an AI song that Jared Morris put together from the assembly call. He took some of Mackenzie Holmes' quotes from last year and kind of spliced them together. Or, well, he didn't splice them together. AI did the work. So in that case.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how that works. Jared's more into the AI than I am. So,
yeah,
but
no
anyway.
idea.
So let's get into talking about one of these new teams we're going to see this year, for the Oregon Ducks. And when you look at Oregon, Kelly Graves, and we're going to talk about Kelly Graves here in just a few seconds, but Kelly Graves, the head coach, basically from 2015 to 22, the Ducks went 179-58 over that span, 76% winning percentage overall, 87-37 in the Pac-12, a 70% win percentage. They won 3 straight league titles, 18, 19, and 20. And they also had a second place finish in that run. They had 2 Elite Eights, a Final Four, and a Sweet 16. They were one of what everybody kind of thought was one of those schools that was now kind of here to stay. But then the last 2 years have really seen them backslide somewhat. They went 11-20, and that kind of, with last year especially, went 11-21 last year with a last place finish in the Pac-12. They finished 2-16, and in fact lost their last 14 in a row, including 7 at home. All right, so that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what the Oregon program we're talking about. But I did throw this into the run sheet for any of you who've watched Oregon basketball in the old, the late night, Pac-12 time slot and seen the floor. It was hideous. And I kind of been an Oregon fan off and on, not a hater. The floor was awful. Well, there's a new floor design. there's a new court design that's going to be a little less dark. It's going to be a little brighter, but it's still going to kind of have that woodsy, back in the woods philosophy. But it's not, they will have a new court design. I saw that when I was researching them on their website. So, Kathy, why don't you talk a little bit about IU's history with Oregon?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so Indiana's played Oregon twice in the history. So one was quite a while ago, 1984 through 1985, the 84-85 season. IU lost that game 77-56. That was played in Oregon. They did play them more recently, though. They played them in 2018-19. IU lost that game as well. This game happened to take place in the second round of the NCAA tournament. We lost that game 91-68. But that was a year that Oregon came into the tournament ranked number 2 and ranked and Indiana, seeded number 2, and Indiana was seeded number 10. And as you know, Jeff mentioned, they had a league title that was in that run of 3 years where they had a league title right there. In that middle ground, and some familiar names that played in that game. So on the Oregon side, Sabrina Ionescu had a double at 29, 10, and 12. And if anybody has been watching any Olympics or not, I believe she is on the Olympic teams this year for us as well. So, you know, no slouch of a player with Sabrina there. She's got quite the name for herself and was a huge part of that team back in 2018-29. They also had Lydia Guillaume, who went 2-1. And then on the Indiana side, we had Allie Patberg. She went for 16 points and 5 assists. And Grace Berger was a freshman in that game. And she had 11 points and 4 rebounds coming off of the bench. So there is some history, again, a little bit, one pretty dated one, not too terribly long ago in the past, although time is slipping away from us as we speak. But yeah, so that's kind of the IU history there with Oregon.
Yeah, I threw Giommi in there just because she was the daughter of former IU basketball player Mike Giommi from back in the 1980s. Okay. So that's her stats were not big.
I was trying to wonder the connection.
Yeah, that was the connection for Lydia. I thought some of our older fans would remember Mike. Yeah, but you look at that, you think about it, Kathy, that'll be 6 years ago. Yeah, that's 6 seasons ago, as hard as it is to believe. And let's face it, that 2020 season when the COVID hit, they were going to be a number 1 seed or a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament as well, and probably would have made another deep run. And that probably was the year they really thought maybe they could have won it all. But again, you get in the NCAA tournament, you never know you never say it's, destined or anything, but they would have been probably made good. But the big thing about that was Ionescu graduated then. And then 21, 22, or they still were okay. 22, 23, they made the WNIT. And then last year, they really backslid, as we mentioned earlier. And so let's talk real quick. Coach Kelly Graves will be entering his 11th season at Oregon, his 28th season overall. He has a 69% winning percentage at Oregon, including, but he's only 57% in the Pac-12. The last couple of years have really hurt that part of it. Overall, he had stops at Gonzaga and St. Mary's, where he's, again, a 68, 69% winning percentage. We talked about his record at Oregon with 3 regular season titles, 2 Pac-12 tournaments. At Gonzaga, he had a nice run going. In fact, when I first really became aware of the Gonzaga program back in the mid-2000s, when I was coaching basketball here in Rensselaer, it was with Kelly Graves, and they won 10 regular season titles, 7 West Coast tournaments at Gonzaga. He also spent a couple years at St. Mary's, also on the West Coast. So he's been coach of the year in the Pac-12. He was a 10-time West Coast Conference coach of the year. So it's interesting because I want to come back to Kelly Graves as we get toward plus, because you look at the record and you'd hate to think about it, but this kind of may be a pivotal year for Kelly Graves. But I'm going to throw it back to Kathy and let her talk a little bit about Oregon's season last year from a team perspective.
Yeah. So I think, Jeff, I'll just touch on some of the high level stats here, because as we'll get into more of the detail here, just for awareness of our listeners up front. Jeff and I are already aware of this, but if you haven't dug into Oregon's roster, like we have started looking at, they have almost a completely turnover in the roster. So I don't know how much we're going to be able to glean from their stats from last year. So I'll just be quickly kind of go through some of the high levels. So from a team perspective, they averaged right under 60 points per game. They only had 7 games where they scored over 70 points last year, with 86 being their season high. There was 15 times in that season that they scored 60 or less. On the flip side of it, though, they were also giving up 67 points on defense, which is a scoring margin not in their favor of 7.5, which kind of helps explain the poor season record that they had, especially in the Pac-12 at 2-16. Their tempo is 68.2 possessions, which is pretty slow. That's 268 out of 360 teams. They only shot around 39% from field goal percentage. Even worse, well, obviously it's always worse, but it's not good at 29.4% per game. They averaged 14 turnovers and only forced 10. So really on kind of both sides of the ball, they were fairly poor last year. Again, that, you can get into a lot more stats here if we wanted to, but I think a lot of that speaks exactly why they were 11-21 and 2-16 last year between their full season and their conference season.
Yeah. So let's hit on their couple of the returning players. We'll start off with Filipina Che. She'll be a 6'8" senior center. She was honorable mention all Pac-12 last season, averaged 13 a game, 12 rebounds. So she was a double-double average, 2 assists a game, shot 52%, but only 63% at the free throw line. And last year was her best year. So her career numbers are all below double digits. She's on 8 points a game, 9 rebounds. So she's kind of worked her way into it, but she's their highest returning scorer from that standpoint. The other on their returners is Sophia Bell, 6'1" sophomore guard. Now, again, Tad, this is something we're going to talk about a little bit more at the end, but we'll mention as we go through here on a couple of players. She started 21 games as a freshman last year, but missed the last third of the season with an injury. But she was the number 26 recruit 2 years ago by ESPN, and she was averaging 7 points and 3 rebounds, 2 assists. So she was having a decent freshman year before the injury hit her. So those are their 2 returning players. They are graduated or transferred out like 4 of their top 6 scorers, and we're going to talk about the transfers out a little bit too. But Kathy, speaking of the transfers, let's throw it over to you and let you hit a couple of the high-profile transfers.
Yeah. So the transfers in, again, I mentioned, and Jeff has talked about it too. They've had a lot go out. They brought a lot in. They have 7 transfers coming in. We won't go into detail just for sake of time, insanity here, about those coming in. But I think the headliner for sure is Deja Kelly. Deja Kelly is a 5'8" graduate guard. So she's got 1 year left of eligibility. She's transferring in from North Carolina, where she was 3 times all ACC. While she was at North Carolina last year, she averaged 16 points per game, just around 4 rebounds per game, 3 assists and a steal per game. For her career at North Carolina, she averaged 15.4 points, 3.5 rebounds, 3 assists. She shot 36 field goal and 31% from 3. She's a McDonald's All-American, and coming in 2020, she was the number 10 recruit overall. So I think that for sure, to me, is the highlight, and quite the grab in the transfer portal for Oregon to be able to land Deja Kelly coming from North Carolina.
And Kathy, real quick,
talk on her.
Yeah, that's going to throw it back to you real quick. Just kind of, I didn't know if you had a chance. I did watch a few clips here and there of some of Oregon and some of the players. So, but I didn't know if you had a chance to see anything. But Kelly is that kind of classic. She's more scorer than shooter. She'll knock a shot down here or there, but she's really better in transition and off the dribble, which something that we have struggled with guard wise in terms of containing the dribble. So, but I just, again, to me, that's their biggest. I think this isn't, this is like the Mr. Obvious moment here. This is by far, to a large degree, in my opinion, I want to get yours. Their season, how it goes, is going to be very dependent upon how well Deja Kelly plays and can lift up some of the others.
Yeah, I agree, because we'll touch on a few of the other transfers coming in here. And again, Jeff talked about some of the transfers out that they've had as well. They've got a lot of pieces they're going to have to put together. And Deja Kelly is coming in with not just great experience, but productive experience, right? Like, she has proven that she can produce. But can she do it in a new system with a whole new set of teammates? That's going to be, I think, the wild card. I agree with you, Jeff. I think how Deja Kelly comes in and fits into the Oregon system. Does she fit as well as she fit into the North Carolina system? I think there was a different kind of play between those 2 teams. So it'll be interesting to see if Coach Kelly here continues with what we kind of saw from there last year, which was kind of a slower pace, or if maybe he changes what he did with Deja Kelly coming in.
And Kathy, why don't you hit on the next two?
Yeah. So I'll talk about Alexis Whitfield next. Alexis Whitfield is a 6'2" graduate, so another person with just, I believe, 1 year of eligibility left. She's a forward. She spent 2 seasons at UC Santa Barbara and 2 at Washington. At the Big West, in the Big West last year, she was first team last season. And then I think this was last year, she averaged 16 points per game, 9.8 rebounds, 2.6 assists. She shot 46% field goal and 38% for 3. So an interesting here with the 3-pointers for me is what kind of stuck out, shooting 38% from 3. We talked about as a team, Oregon last year only shot 29%. So it seems to me they're bringing Alexis Whitfield in to kind of help with that overall. But last year, though, in terms of experience, even though she's had 4 years of college experience, she had only started a game last year for the first time. So for her first 3 years, she came off of the bench. So she was a fairly high ranking recruit at number 61, again, in that class of 2020. And then next, I think we'll talk about Salimatu Kuruma. Hopefully I got that correct.
I think you did.
For that young lady. Yes. Thank you. So she is a 5'11", again, another graduate forward. Last year she spent the season at Arizona, and before that she spent 2 seasons at Little Rock. She missed last 19 games last year, however, due to injury. But prior to that, she was averaging 9.5 points per game, 3.3 rebounds, and just under an assist. She was shooting 49% field goal percentage, but only 29% from 3. So I don't know that the 3-pointer is probably where we're going to see her fit in. I'm guessing she's a little more closer to the basket with the 49% field goal percentage there.
Yeah, and at Little Rock, she had been the Ohio Valley Conference Player of the Year, so where she'd put up some decent numbers. But as you said, Kathy, she was only averaging about 10 points a game at Arizona. So step up in competition. It wasn't quite before she was injured. Even she wasn't putting up the kind of number she had in the OVC. But you kind of hit there, 6'2", 5'11", maybe trying to get a little quicker, for Kelly Graves. What do you think about, from that standpoint?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first 3 folks that we've covered, like you mentioned, we have a 5'8", a 5'11", and a 6'2", guard or forward, however you like to slot them in. So yeah, I think that maybe they're trying to maybe speed that up, right? Again, their tempo, as I mentioned, it was, in the very bottom, not bottom, but towards the, lower half of the whole conference. Excuse me, I'm having trouble with the words. They played slow last year.
Yes.
So I think that this is definitely especially with Deja Kelly coming in and Salimatu. It does, at least on paper, and what I saw Deja Kelly too last year playing, I think they're trying to kind of speed that guard plate up that they have. So
and then go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
I was just
go ahead.
And then then you kind of throw in a wild card here on the transfer portal. They picked up Nani Falatea, a 5'9" junior guard. She'll be a redshirt junior. But she's been 3 seasons at BYU, but she missed all but 3 games last year due to an injury. But she, as a sophomore at BYU, she was all West Coast Conference first team. Put up some decent numbers. So they went out, they got a little, maybe I would say smaller, but they look like they went out to try and look for shooting, and they looked like they were looking for speed and athleticism in the portal. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that too. And then we throw in Ari Long from Washington to kind of help round out their bench. Amina Muhammad as well, who played at Texas for 2 years. Didn't put up a whole lot of numbers, either one of them. But again, you have to have bodies in practice. You have to have a bench. And, we'll talk again about the folks that they kind of lost. But you got to have at least people to help with that. So you can't go out and get 8, 9, whatever people that are going to be all-stars like Deja Kelly. So it's an interesting mix of folks that they have coming in. But it definitely does seem, at least again on paper, that they're looking to be a little quicker, a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit faster play. Um, It'll be interesting to see if that translates then when they get into the Big Ten
Mm,
on how that will be against some of the other teams that they have now with a whole new conference coming in. But clearly what they were doing last year was not working in the Pac-12. So, kudos again. Obviously, Coach Graves is an amazing coach with what he has done previously before those last 2 years. And I would like to talk about that once we get, past some of these details on what may have happened the last 2 years. But he knew what they needed, and the coaching staff was able to go out and fill quite a few of those players.
And then they've got a couple of interesting incoming fries. So, Kathy, why don't you talk about those two?
Yeah, so quickly, we have 2 incoming freshmen. Katie Fizo is a 5'11" guard. She's coming in from Seattle. She was the number 31 overall recruit in this class by ESPN and the number 1 in the state of Washington. She was also the Gatorade Player of the Year in Washington. And then Faith Etut is a 6 foot even freshman, forward, obviously a freshman. She played actually over in Luxembourg, which happened to be the same league that Amanda Cahill's team in Luxembourg played. The team she played on finished second to that Amanda Cahill team. Where she was able to average 14.3 points and almost 10 rebounds. So she almost averaged a double-double playing in that Luxembourg league. So I think that's an interesting one in particular. So I think Faith, for me, of the incoming freshman is probably the one I would expect might be able to get onto the floor. I don't know enough about Katie as a true high school freshman coming in, but Faith, obviously what we saw from like Yarden and our team and coming in with kind of that international experience and having that, almost for potentially, essentially professional playing time. She comes in probably ready more than most freshmen are going to. So I can see her coming in and helping to round out, maybe not starting, but I would see her coming off of the bench and potentially giving them some good minutes.
See, I could see both of them starting by the time we get to Big Ten season, the bulk of Big Ten season, like after the first of the year. I don't know how much you looked at their website. One of the things that Kelly Grace pointed out about it today was when he kind of pointed out that he really liked the idea that she had basically played professional basketball. Like the idea that college kids were not going to overwhelm her. Some older college kids with that kind of thing wasn't going to overwhelm her. But again, I think you look at Fizo as a kid they went out and got because they were looking to get quicker, more athletic. And I think maybe trying to get away from some of that, of what had happened the last couple years. But I think those are a couple kids. Again, and part of it will be injuries. We'll talk a little bit about that as we wrap up the episode, but because that's one of the things I want to kind of talk a little bit about. But let's real quick hit the transfers out and I want to get your thoughts. Grace Van Sluten, 6'3" junior, transferred to Michigan State. She averaged 15 and 7 for Oregon last year. She was their leading scorer. Chance Gray, 5'9" junior guard to Ohio State. She averaged 14 a game and 3 assists. So she was their second leading scorer. And then Kennedy Basham, a 6'7" junior forward, transferred to Arizona State. So they had 3 pretty high profile kids transfer out as well.
Yeah. And then you add a fourth in with Priscilla Williams. She wasn't really much in the rotation, but it's still another, person. Again, you got to have people in practice and helping with that and potentially injuries and whatnot. So yeah, 3, their top 2 scorers have transferred out now. And then, Kennedy Basham as well. Was right up there. I believe I think she was one of their key rotation folks as well. So, yeah, that back to what you were talking about with the injuries on the transfers in, looking at them in aggregate, there's a number of them that had key injuries last year too. And I think that's also going to be a wild card. You never know how players are going to be. We don't know enough about what their injuries were to know how much it might have affected their recovery time. How they're going to do then coming into a new system, coming off a recovery of injuries and all of that. There are a lot of pieces, I think, here for Oregon to put together to see how they start gelling by the time they get to conference play.
Yeah, let's go back real quick to the transfer portal. And I get it. The portal hits a lot of teams. For IU this year, for Terry Moore not to lose a player to the portal is speaking volumes. Enough that the players are still buying in. Nobody disgruntled enough to be like, you know what, I'm just going somewhere else. But Oregon here, and again, Oregon was a team that we just talked about 6 seasons ago, was a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. Indiana played them in the second round. I think it was Texas that IU beat in the first round out in Eugene. And then played Oregon on their home floor with Sabrina Ionescu, who was by far the player of the year that year. But I think there is a red flag there when you have some of the transfer outs of like a Van Sluten, a Gray, Sydney Parrish. I mean, obviously I would love to get Sydney's thoughts, but I would think Sydney knows enough. Even after she graduates, I doubt Sydney would come on a podcast and be like, well, this is why I left Oregon. And, but I don't think she'd ever publicly say that, but I think there are some red flags. We would be, if we were losing, if Yarden Garzon and I've gone brain dead here. Lexi Bargesser. I'm trying to think who else we got back. All of a sudden, we're going totally
Lily.
Brain dead here. Lily, but if kid, especially or like if and obviously it didn't happen, but if a Mackenzie Holmes left, rather than player last year at Indiana but went somewhere else, there would be some people would have some questions and red flags, and I think that's kind of what Oregon's been dealing with the last few years. I'm not sure. Obviously, Deja Kelly coming in gives them be like, look, we went out and got a pretty good player.
That's right.
But I think we've had some of those same questions about the men's program here at IU that we've luckily not really had about the women's program. How long can you sustain program by having to rely on the portal? So kind of wanted to get your thoughts about what you thought. Obviously we don't know enough about Oregon specifically, but just kind of in general, kind of some red flags, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, looking through the folks that they have coming in, again, we talked about Deja Kelly enough, but I think it's the other folks that are going to be really wild card as well. You don't have a whole lot of them that played it at high major teams. Right. You did have Amina Muhammad who played at Texas, but she didn't do a whole lot at Texas. You got Nani in there, who is at BYU, if you want to consider them, high level, but again, where she was able to, but she missed all but 3 games last year. So you don't really know how that suited her. Before that, she was putting up some good numbers as a sophomore. Ari Long came from Washington, but again, she didn't have much production at Washington. So if she didn't do it at Washington, do we have any thinks that she's going to make a huge jump at Oregon, right? It doesn't, while they got a lot of players coming in and it seems like there are different pieces and they want to transform them, I don't know out of Deja Kelly where you have the proven production that you would have had if you would even just take one of the two between Van Sluten and Chance Gray. Again, they're top 2 scorers last year. If you get one of the two back, in addition to Deja Kelly, now you're starting to talk, but they don't have that. And so that's going to be the interesting thing to me because there's no continuity there. They don't know the system. You don't really have proven production. You have a lot of them coming off injuries. There just seems like a lot stacked up against them. And now you're changing conferences where you're going to have travel come into play. Then you don't understand how that's going to impact any of your players and in your team gelling together. There's a lot to do with Oregon. That we just don't know. The one thing we do know is we know that prior to the last 2 years, we know that that Coach Kelly has put up a lot of points, and we know he can probably do it again. So do you think though? I know it's only 2 seasons. Do you think though he's on the hot seat this year, or do you think he's going to have some grace this year with the new roster, the new conference, and then it'll be see how this year goes, and then if he doesn't put up this year, he's got one more year.
Yeah, that is, and we'd reached out to Alec Dietz, who is the beat reporter for the Eugene paper in Oregon, who covers Oregon women basketball, but he also covers football. And they had started preseason practice today, and he had to be at a presser after they're 2 hours behind. So we're going to hopefully have Alec on later in the season as we get ready to play. But one of the things I really wanted to ask Alec was kind of get his sense of what is the situation of Kelly Graves, because there's a part of me that's like, man, you look at his resume, he shouldn't be on the hot seat, but it has really become a what have you done for me lately?
That's right.
Profession. And you've missed the tournament 2 years in a row. They made the WNIT 2 years ago, missed it completely last year with the 11-21 record. And their Pac-12 tournament game, they got blown out. Colorado beat them like 70-39 or 80-39, something like that. I mean, it was terrible. It was like 38-11 at the half. And, it was just, it was not even good. I mean, it just wasn't good. And so I think he'll get, I think it's warm personally, but I think he probably can survive another 11 and 20 year. But if he does, if you bring in Deja Kelly, especially, and you still end up 11 and 20, then there's going to be I think there's going to be a lot more questions. But it's the Nike flagship school. So, Nike wants that university to have as much success as possible because it allows them to promote everything Nike. Obviously I wouldn't know what his contract status is or anything like that, but yeah, it's a great question, Kathy. It was one of the things I had in the run sheet, is just like, but like I just mentioned, Nike money allows you to go out and pay some NIL money. You get, they probably don't want for NIL money. The move to a new conference probably buys him a year, the fact that you're coming in and now we're going to have to do some of that travel. But what do you think? I mean, obviously you don't follow the coaching quite the way I do, because that was what I did. I'm always kind of following those rumor mills and things, even as a fan. But what do you think?
Yeah, I personally would think, I don't know if I think this, I would hope, I'll say that. I would hope that all of everything else he did for Oregon, between, 3 years in a row as the conference champions and, multiple runs pretty deep into the tournament. I understand they haven't won the title underneath him, but they had 2 Elite Eights, a Final Four, a Sweet 16. I would hope that would give him some kind of weight and allow them some patience to see what he can do with this, incoming team. I would expect that, a record from last year of 11 and 21 and 2 and 16, even though they're changing conferences. I don't know that is going to be too acceptable. I would expect they would see some improvement. Maybe he misses the tournament again, and that's okay, as long as they show some kind of improvement, and then give him one more year. But I think if they go 4 years in a row not making that tournament, I would see squarely that his seat is not just hot, but on fire.
But kind of like we talked about with Washington last week, Kathy, maybe they surprise us, but on paper, even with Deja Kelly coming in, but with what, and the other things they've got, and even if they put all the puzzle pieces really together pretty quickly, do we really think this is a top half of the league team in the Big Ten? I'm not sure they are, at least on paper.
No, it doesn't feel like it to me. Again, like I was kind of mentioning, like outside of Deja Kelly, who has proven production out of their transfers coming in? You're really banking on now Deja Kelly and Filipina that is coming back from them, the third highest scorer from last year. If Che and Deja Kelly maintain where they're at, that's still only 2 players. And last year they had 3 players that double digits, and they still couldn't average more than 60 points a game as a team. So there's clearly was not the other pieces surrounding the people. So even if you get Che and Deja Kelly coming back with their same production, there's no one, as I look down their roster, that helps me believe that they're going to have enough pieces to put around without some really major jumps in what they did in previous seasons, or having your freshmen come in, which there's only 2 of them, and they both would have to knock it out of the park. There's just a lot to expect from either freshmen or from people to make huge jumps, I think, for them to come in and make a whole lot of waves. So for me, again, if I'm an Oregon fan, I'm looking to see that they make improvement for where they were last year. But I set my expectations where, they're probably middle to lower part of the Big Ten. They probably aren't going to make the NCAA. Hopefully they at least can make the WNIT this time, but you got to temper the expectations, because I don't see it on paper anyway. But yeah, maybe they surprise us. You never know until, the balls gets rolled out onto the court.
Yeah. And we've mentioned this a couple times, but you've got Bell, Kuaruma, and Falatea that are coming off injuries.
Right.
Bell's one that I think has a chance to up her game. I think she has that potential, watching a little bit of their games last year, where you could see that she has some talent. Again, pretty high profile recruit 2 years ago, but got injured. But I could see her going from 7 points a game to 11. I'm not saying she's going to 17, but I could see her going from 7 to 11, 7 to 12, making a nice little jump. But when I watched them again, and this is the thing, all of the stuff of watching last year probably won't matter for this year because they've so retooled the roster. But last season, if you only had to watch about 5, the average fan could have picked it up in 5 minutes. I picked it up in about 5 minutes as well. Just, but I noticed some things right away. They were big, they were slow, they were unathletic. And in the Pac-12 last year, that was not a recipe for success. It was, I mean, because you had some really good teams who were big and fast and athletic, and they were kind of the opposite. They played slow, as Kathy mentioned, with tempo, a lot of two-post offense stuff, because you had Che as a 6'8" center. Basham would be on the floor quite a bit with her. Van Sluten would be on times on the block. As well. They played a lot of matchup zone on defense, and they were often lost. And I couldn't believe, watching just the several clips I watched them on defense, just how lost they were. And a matchup zone isn't the easiest thing to play anyway. But if you've been practicing it every day and you're really, with that, you shouldn't be getting lost in it, where sometimes you're just leaving people wide open for open shots or even layups. But as we've talked about already, they got very active in the portal. They had to, because they lost 3. But I think Kelly Grace probably would have gotten pretty active in the portal, even if he just had to replace some of his graduating players, because I think he realizes he had to get quicker, more athletic.
Yeah, I do too. So, yeah, overall, it's interesting too. They went 0-5 against all the other new Big Ten schools, former Pac-12. So, which isn't surprising. They went 0 a lot against a lot of teams in the Pac-12 last year with only 2 wins. But
they beat.
Question for you, Jeff.
I was just going to say, their 2 wins were early in January. They beat Arizona and Arizona State on a weekend, basically a back-to-back weekend in Eugene, and then they lost 14 in a row.
Yeah, there you go. That's right, because we didn't mention that they lost their last 14 games, right? So,
yeah.
Jeff, do you know, did Coach Graves consistently coach a matchup zone for defense, or do you think he was thinking the personnel that he had would have fit better in that and was trying something different, where we may not see that again from them this year?
I didn't go back and watch, but I don't remember the INSQ teams being matchup zone teams. I could be wrong, but just based on memory, I don't remember those teams. They were more up tempo, for one, way more up tempo than I saw on the video of last year's team. And again, the personnel change. You got to change with your personnel sometimes. But yeah, I don't remember them being a big matchup zone team. But they may have been. I just don't remember it that way. I remember them being much more aggressive defensively. INSQ really kind of being the focal point of everything. But yeah. So, but no, I don't recall that. But they were not very good in the matchup zone last year.
Yep. Good. All right.
Let's wrap this up.
All right, let's do it then. Oops.
So, Kathy, I just was kind of my view as we were doing final thoughts already. But is there anything else you want to add about Oregon before we get out of here tonight?
No, I don't think so. Just, to kind of put a bow on it. I think we've kind of said it a number of times, just to hit that nail one more time. I don't think we know what to expect of Oregon. Right. On paper, I don't see that they're going to be a team that I expect to be in that top even half of the Big Ten. But you never know until the games are played. There's been other teams that have surprised us in the past, both in a positive and a negative way. And Oregon very well could be that. I'm not going to count Coach Graves out. He has a history of showing he can coach and coach very well. So I'm not going to count them at all. But they will be an interesting one to see if we can watch a few non-conference games to start getting a feel of them before we go out there, right? I think Indiana goes out there to play them.
Yep.
Yeah. So there'll be an interesting wild card, I think, in the conference for us this year.
So our next show is going to be August 14th. Again, same time, 7:00 Central, 8 Eastern. We will spotlight another new team coming to the league. This time it'll be the UCLA Bruins, who we expect to be a top 5 preseason team coming into the season. If I remember right, Kathy, it didn't like ESPN, Charlie Cream have him his way too early at number 5. Yeah.
Number 5. That's right. Yeah.
So expect UCLA again. So we're kind of moving south. I had to actually look this up. I actually Googled it, which school was, farther north/south, UCLA or USC, to figure out which one we were doing next. Our plan was to kind of go south to north or north to south. So UCLA be next. Then we'll be back in about a month with USC. But so our next show is August 14th. We'll spotlight UCLA. If you want to see us do the show live and be a part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@ the @ symbol @ Back Home Network. So youtube.com/@ Back Home Network. You can be a part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. Special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our logos. Also, a big thank you to Bob Thompson for our music that you heard throughout the broadcast, and to Jared Morris for his AI-inspired Mackenzie Home song. I also want to thank you for listening wherever you get your feed from, or if you watched us live. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you in 2 weeks. Until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers.
And that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Yeah, this is one I think on paper you got to look at, even though it's out in Eugene. And I will not be surprised if this is one of those where you go play Washington on like a Wednesday and Oregon, or vice versa, Oregon on a Saturday. I think that's what I think travel wise, those are the things that make the most sense. It really does.
Yeah.
I think you have to make those like a double play. There isn't, I just don't see how the Big Ten thinks it's beneficial to say fly out to Washington the first week of December and then go back out to Oregon the last week in January. I just don't see that. But I think if you're looking on paper, this right now, you got to chalk up as a W. This is one of those that should be a W.
It should be the lack of experience with this team coming in together, playing together. That's what I mean by lack of experience as a team compared to the people we have coming back, to which I know we'll highlight later as we get closer to the season. But I think we have a lot more proven production coming back than Oregon does for sure. So I agree with you, Jeff. I think it's one we should expect to win again. We may change our mind when we do the preview for them closer to the game. We may see they come out and are just gelling together amazingly. You never know. But as of right now, on July 31st, I agree with you. I chalk this one up as a win.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we didn't really mention this during the light part of the show, as opposed to doing the work dark time here, or after dark, whatever we should call it. But he really went out and got kids that basically only have 1 year for the most part.
Yes, I noticed that too as we were kind of walking through it. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting how, you can maybe get some success this year, but you're still kind of going to be back in the same boat next year.
Yeah.
You're going to have to replace Kelly. You're going to have to replace Whitmore for sure. I don't remember. I think, I'm totally spacing her now. The one that was at Arizona last year.
Well, you already got Che, who I think is a senior.
Kuruma. Yeah. And yes. Che's a senior.
And Deja Kelly's going out. Alexis Whitfield will be going out. Kuruma is a graduate. So that's 4 already. Quickly going down the list here. So, we don't know how many other seniors on their roster that we didn't even get into that were already maybe lower on the bench or whatever. So, and only 2 incoming freshmen. So we already know they're at a deficit between, and that's just, assuming both of the freshmen stay. And then you have 4 for sure leaving. And then, more than likely they're probably going to have some transfers out. And obviously not close enough to Oregon to have any idea what their next recruiting class looks like. So
no, I don't either. And again, women's recruiting doesn't quite get the buzz that men's recruiting does.
We don't get quite the coverage, but it's getting better.
So. It is getting better. I totally agree. So, hey, Kathy, you have a great weekend and a couple of weeks, and we'll talk to you in 2 weeks and about UCLA Bruins.
Sounds great. All right. Good night, everybody. Take care.
See you, everybody.